Hello, my name is Andrew Tripotto, and this is the Imperfect Union podcast. It's a podcast that is seeking to better understand American community, what it is, how it affects us, and how we might be able to shape it moving forward. I intentionally speak to people who are not notables in their field or on this subject, because this is a subject that is inherently egalitarian and inherently involving all of us. So my inaugural episode, my last episode was with a pen name Kaiser. He has asked me to not share his real name, who wrote a book called Tolerance: The Return of Christ, on what it was like to be gay in the American military in the early 2000s. Today, I'm talking to two former students of mine. I am a government and economics high school teacher, and I taught these students for several years in various different subjects. I also teach U.S. history and speech and debate. And they both just recently graduated, so they're off to college in a couple months. And I spoke to them about what they think their generation brings to the table in terms of strengthening or weakening American community, and how they think politics is going to change as a result of their generation's influence on it. So this was a conversation that was recorded during the height of the Black Lives Matter protests that was happening all over the world, and particularly powerfully in American cities. And we had the conversation in Miami. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Christina Joseph and Madeline Lay. Have fun.
Okay.
How's your summer been, Mimi?
It's been pretty good. Yeah.
Are you staying at home mostly still, or have you started venturing out?
No, I've been staying home, aside from like the protests where I was like around like hundreds of people, but yeah, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them with you. I really.
Why haven't you, Christy? You absolutely should.
Okay, it's just the problem is my little siblings. Like sometimes my dad. I know you can hear. It's my dad and like my brother sometimes work at the same time, and I really want to go with my brother. So like he said he'd take me. Like he totally take me. It's just like I have to figure out like what's a good day and what's a good like time, and then where to go and stuff like that. Like, can you send me information, Mimi? Like if you find it, or I'm gonna like try to find like good protests that we can go to.
Well, this Friday there's going to be a bunch of them, I'm sure. It's Juneteenth.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure. Okay.
I actually, because like I live with my grandparents, I got in trouble for going to the protest. So I don't know if I'll be able to go to another one. Obviously, like I totally like would, but I got in trouble. So yeah.
Did you have to like self-quarantine in your room for a week after? Or what was that?
So my mom's side is like more like freaked out about this whole coronavirus stuff. So I actually just stayed at my dad's.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, I'm fine, obviously. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, at least you had somewhere else to go, for a while.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for me, it's kind of been like, I'm freaked out about it, but like when I go see friends or when I see like other people, like even like that little party we had, like it's like people are not like as freaked out about it. You know what I mean? Like some people are just like chill. Like when I go out like to the gas station even, or like to go buy groceries and stuff like that, like there's people that don't have any masks. They don't care. Like they're just running around like. Even people with like babies just walking around with no mask or like no like they don't like crap.
Mr. Tripotto, do you know like the Karen reference?
Oh my god.
Yeah, why?
Okay, so like sometimes like if I see someone like without a mask or like doing something like with a lot of people, I like have like a Karen mentality, and I'm like, can you like wear a mask or something? Like I feel so uncomfortable sometimes when like I'm around people, like strangers without a mask. Like for example, if I'm like waiting to pick up food or something, it's just like
Absolutely.
annoying. It really makes but yeah.
But I mean, it's interesting to navigate, right? Because it's like, is it rude or are you being responsible? And what's the difference between those two things? Like, I think, in my opinion, they're being rude for not wearing a mask and then forcing you to say something.
I agree. I actually like. Oh, sorry, Christy. Go ahead.
But like, there was this video of this Karen. She was going to a supermarket, and like, they let her in because she wasn't wearing a mask, and she said she had a medical condition, but like, she didn't bring any records of this medical condition that she supposedly had. And so they were like, "Lady, like, we can't let you in. Like, you don't have a mask on. We're not trying to get coronavirus. Like, you can't come in." And so like, they're like, "We'll shop for you. We'll get your groceries. Just give us your card." And she's like, "No, I don't want to give you my card." That was her voice. "I don't want to give you my card. I have a medical condition." Like, I'm like, and it was just like, dude, like, why do you feel so entitled? And it's the one thing that pisses me off that they say it's like, oh, it's America, it's a free country, but like, that's a private business. I think that's something a lot of people don't get. Like, if as long as something is not public, you're not free to do whatever you want. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah.
But then it's also, I think it's another different, but also as important question about like something like the protests, right? Like, do you, like the fact that that hasn't been brought up very much is kind of strange to me, you know? Like, people should be wearing masks at the protest more.
Yeah. I mean, when I went to the protest, everyone was like wearing a mask, which is good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing this, guys, during summer. I am trying to become like a podcast entrepreneur. I realize that I love having interesting conversations with people about just big questions about society. And instead of like being weird and trying to hoist big questions on my friends like during dinner, I thought that I would like create a platform that allows me to just interview people about the things that a lot of us want to talk about. And the name of the podcast is Imperfect Union. And the idea is that it's sort of a hard look at the difficult question of like community in the United States. Like, what does it mean to be a member of the community of America? That's been a hard question since the country was founded, you know? And it gets harder, it seems, by the day. So I'm curious about your guys' perceptions just about like as recent graduates of high school, like what does it mean to be an American to you? I've heard people say that it makes them sad and that they feel ashamed sometimes. I've heard people say that they're very proud. I mean, obviously there's a ton of nuance between both of those positions. But just for the sake of listeners, I used to be your teachers. Yeah, Madeline is glitching. Christy, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay. Yeah, Mimi's tech is having some trouble. All right. Let's see if we can get back here.
Well, okay.
So what I wanted to ask you, Chris, sorry, go ahead.
So it's going to be a broad, like, type of podcast thing that's, like, under an umbrella of, like, different topics. So, like, let's say we want to talk about beauty standards, like, in America and how it affects, like, people. Like, could that be, like, different? Like, it's going to be, like, different topics and, like, different...
Oh, yeah, you can take the conversation. You can take the conversation wherever you want to. I have some questions that I, want to cover, but other than that, we can talk about anything you want.
Cool.
So I want to start with questions about just like your political activity and what you perceive to be your peers' mindsets towards political activity and civic life. Here, Mimi's joining again. We'll wait for her. And Christy, I know you've got a bunch of thoughts on that because you've have a little bit of a different mindset than a lot of your peers, at least at Cushman.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So,
I mean, for me, like, something that's really been discouraging me, or like been turning me off to politics, is like partisanship. Like it's a very like it's very divisive, and it's very like you're like they like to take people with different views and different values and just like box them into one thing, or like they box this other group. Like you have conservative versus liberal, or like right wing versus left wing, and like all these different things, and it really like makes me like upset, because you have a lot of people that like it's just like there's no respect for other people's opinions. You know what I mean? Like as long as just because someone has a different opinion than you doesn't make them like stupid, or just it doesn't make them like dumb, or like they don't think or whatever. Like it's just, they just have a different perspective of life than you, and like I feel like people have just lost like so much respect for that, because it's like this whole partisanship thing, like Democrat, Republican, has like divided people so much, and like it's made people forget that like, hey, like we're all people, we all have issues, and we're all struggling with different issues, and we have to figure out a way to solve everyone and take care of everyone. Like it's not just about what Republicans want and how Republicans want the country to be run, or how what Democrats want and how like Democrats want the country to be run. It needs to be about everybody. Every subgroup in America needs to be taken care of and needs to be paid attention to, if we're going to be like a country that like everyone has the ability to be happy, and that has the ability to like succeed.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I wonder, it seems like partisanship obscures the things that we have in common, right? Like obviously we're all different. We have different perspectives and opinions on things, but the level of partisanship has reached a fever pitch, and it's become something where we think of each other as enemies, right? Rather than people trying to figure this all out together, you know? What do you, so Mimi, when you were gone, I sort of gave the overview, which is that the purpose of this podcast called Imperfect Union is to just really discuss in depth what it means to be an American and what it means to be a part of an American community. And Christy started off by saying, it doesn't feel like I'm a part of a community because partisanship is so vicious, right? We feel like we're literally two countries. Why? Why do you think we have partisanship in the level of intensity that we do in this country? And is there a path forward that is less partisan? I frankly don't know.
That's actually like a really hard question. I think people like care so much about issues that if like someone like disagrees with them, they really like take it personally, I guess. Like I feel like I started seeing like partisanship in like the 2016 election, and a lot of people got offended. I got offended by many things. So when I think that like that happens, obviously it's going to create some divisiveness, especially if you do have like a candidate who is literally running for the president of the United States, who is like insulting so many groups of people. Obviously partisan happens on both sides. I think Democrats and Republicans are both guilty of it. And so I really don't know if like in the future like this will be fixed. I mean, I don't see it getting any better. But it also depends on who will be elected in like the next election and those to follow.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, right? So just for the audience, you guys are both 18. You recently graduated from high school. So the 2016 election is kind of the first time you guys were both 14 then, or 15, where you were conscious adults following a presidential election. I can tell you that in my lifetime, I'm 30, I've never seen as partisan of an election as that one and as divisive of an election as that one. But we did have pretty dug in political parties before that. But do you think that, I mean, how much can we really blame Trump for this? Like, what do you think that there's something that we should be doing as American people other than electing him out of office? You know, if we want to reduce the animosities between parties, but is there a way for like Americans to get around political leaders that aren't demonstrating the sorts of values that we believe in?
I think that it has a lot to do with the media and like how they take like certain things and portray in a way that fits the narrative that they want to push on the public. So like, for example, if you take like Fox News, right? Fox News portrays like the Black Lives Matter movement as like rioting and like they're like a problem because like they're protesting violently and they're against the police and like all that stuff, right? And CNN does the exact opposite, right? That causes like a lot of issues, especially like within like different groups. Like if I live in like an area where there's not a lot of Black people, like where it's not very diverse, like I'm more likely to listen to what Fox News is saying because I don't have any type of perspective of like what it's like to be a Black person in America, right? Versus if I live in a more diverse city and CNN is like covering Black Lives Matter, like I'm gonna resonate more with them. Like I think I kind of agree with Trump when he says media is the enemy of the people because it's like well, in some instances they'll tell the truth, but it's not the whole truth, or they twist it in a way where like it's like their truth. And there's always three sides to every story. Like there's like my truth, your truth, and then like what actually is happening. So I think media needs to be formed in a way in which they give us the facts and they let Americans like digest the facts and think for themselves rather than feeding them the narrative. Because like, and I think the reason they feed Americans the narrative is because a lot of media news outlets like are owned by corporations. So like specific agendas and like pushing them on the American people and having the American people think a specific way is beneficial sometimes to like these, you know, billion-dollar, million-dollar corporations. Like with Fox News, like they'll promote cutting taxes, right? Cutting taxes benefits the wealthy the most. And like look at all of Fox News's like anchors, like look at how much money they all have, like look at how much like funding they get from like a lot of these billion-dollar corporations. So like I said, media should be for the people and not for a small group of people that are looking to control how Americans should think.
I think that that's an absolutely correct point and well stated. And let me just also say that like I'm not going to call on you guys, obviously, just like jump in whenever you want to talk. I'm going to do that. Christy, what if I were a media executive, what I would say to you is that it is for the people. The fact that we get so many views when we put these types of stories on shows that people want to hear this and want to watch what we're giving them, right? Our job is to attract attention and then share the news. And we are absolutely succeeding in attracting attention, right? We've got a lot of media viewership right now. And if they were to just kind of run facts in a neutral way, I don't know if people would pay as much attention. Like imagine if instead of on CNN, instead of there being like a rabble, or Fox News, instead of being like a really pumped, pissed off person telling us about how ridiculous these Republicans or these Democrats are, it was some guy, you know, just being like sharing both sides of the issue in a very measured tone. I don't think as many people would tune in.
Yeah, so for me, Fox News is actually on both of my households, so I spend a lot of time watching Fox, and sometimes I appreciate like hearing these news anchors' opinions on things because it just helps me formulate like stronger ones and articulate my ideas better. I spend a lot of my nights just listening to Tucker Carlson, and as angry as he makes me, I find myself like in my head just responding to everything he's saying. So I think that if you consume like a healthy amount of 2 or more like different medias and just make sure you're listening to what everything is saying, it can actually be like really helpful and beneficial to you.
Yeah. So a well-balanced media diet might be what saves us. How do we get people to do what you do?
Well, I mean, when it comes to this, I think we really have to think about like why is it that like if I try to put on like neutral news or like a story that's neutral, like people won't want to watch or like people won't want to tune in? Is it because like it would be boring, or is it because like it's not like as dramatic and it's not as fun to watch? Like I think we really have to look at the way we think about things like philosophically. Like why is it okay like to some people like to be like for like a news outlet or for anybody to like just feed you opinions rather than like you they give you the facts and you think for yourselves? Like why is this type of like line of thinking of, oh, you know, I don't want to watch this because it's like neutral or it's like not as biased and it's not as fun to watch, but like I'm being fed like a specific opinion. Like, why is that line of thinking okay, and why is it accepted in society? Like, shouldn't we be raising a society of individuals that want to learn the facts, and that want to have the ability to think for themselves rather than just being sheep?
Yeah. So I want to respond directly to that in a second, but I just want to also point out that the reason Madeline, you just said the reason you watch Tucker Carlson every night isn't because like you admire his, how articulate he is or his like peachy visage. It's so that you can form counter arguments, right? So you're going into that being like, okay, how can I undermine this guy and his arguments? And so I wonder, are people going to be motivated if they're truly just going to places that are to learn neutral information? To Christy's point, and Christy, it sounded like you were implying that we need to teach people to want neutral information more. Is that what you're implying?
Yeah, and to want to be able to like process the information in their brains and think for themselves and come to a conclusion or an opinion about a matter. Like I feel like society and like our family and like all these different influences shape who we are too much, and like that's really stunting like the growth and like the progress of humanity. Like if your society is messed up and they accept like hating a specific group of people, or like they accept like, you know, persecuting or like doing really messed up things, like, and that like that's all you allow to influence you in life, you're gonna think it's okay. But like rather than you going out there seeking the information or getting neutral information and you coming to conclusion and saying like, wait a minute, like this is wrong, like we can't be doing this. Like that's why like propaganda is one of the main reasons why like we've had so many atrocities like in society. Like look at the Holocaust. Like look at the propaganda that they put out about Jewish people, and it like got millions of people killed because like it was the propaganda that went into people's minds that like they were like, oh, okay, this isn't happening, let's just ignore it. You see what I'm saying? So we really have to think about like who we're allowing to shape our opinions and like how we're allowing like society to shape our opinions. Like if our society is messed up and it like if our world is messed up, like why should we allow like what they think or who or like what their values, like why should we allow them to shape us? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it's almost like you're saying that we have a privatized propaganda system, right? Propaganda is when the state tries to unduly influence opinion. So we have private media outlets doing the same thing, is what you're saying. Mimi, what do you think? How do we reform? Christy just put a bunch of tough questions to us. How do we reform the news media so that it does a better job of educating people rather than firing them up to go to war?
I don't know if I know how to answer that question. For me personally, I don't find anything wrong with like people sharing like factual information and also like including like their opinions on it. Um, Another person I watch like on CNN, for example, who kind of does the same thing as Tucker Carlson is Chris Cuomo, and he kind of really like shares his opinion on certain issues, and that's also like really helpful for me to be able to understand something like better. I feel like just a really big part of media and news is like um it gets a lot of people's attention, and that's because people share their ideas, and that's because we see people like angry or like happy about something. So obviously I agree with Christy in that like everything needs to be like factual, but I don't know, I think I'm even biased sometimes when it comes to like the news sources that I agree with and that like I don't agree with.
No.
So I just don't know. Yeah. I don't know if it's fair that I even answer that question. I do think that sometimes like certain like news medias can be really harmful to people's like opinions. But that's why you need to watch like more than just one. So yeah, that's a hard question, Christy.
No, and I think it's a question that not just the United States, but some of the smartest people in the world are grappling with. Um, so my take on this is that the First Amendment protects news organizations to share the news how they see fit, right? They can blend opinion with fact, right? They have that right, free speech, right? And so that makes it so that the government can't coerce news organizations into saying what the government wants them to say. Thank God, right? We're very fortunate for that. But it creates this clusterfuck of where we are now, where there is no authority on how to share the news or what is acceptable when it comes to sharing your opinion or how to frame issues. And as an educator, right, who teaches high school government, I think that it's the job of civics education to create the habits in Americans that will make them want to watch high quality news sources and reject propaganda. Right, so the news sources are businesses. They're gonna make money, right? They need to make money to survive. We need to reward the ones that are doing the type of work that will help our people and help them make intelligent decisions about politics, and punish the ones that don't by not watching them. Do you guys feel like your experience in schools teach you how to be smarter consumers of the news? Like, are we doing a good job? And not just you, but also your friends who go to different schools in different states.
I definitely think so. Just in my speech and debate classes with you and Miss Story like always had us read an article and first like answer the questions like ourselves. And that taught us how to like think independently and formulate our opinions before hearing like yours or Miss Story's, which I think like a lot of students just find it easier to like have the same opinion as their teachers because they're seen as like just more knowledgeable like about the issue. So in my experience in school, I was taught how to think independently, and I do know that at our school, teachers aren't really supposed to share like their political opinions. So yeah.
So civics education, in your experience, is doing its job right now.
In my experience, yes.
Okay. Thank you for the on-air compliment, right? What do you think, Christy?
I mean, personally, yeah, I would say that like civics does do a good job of like teaching like kids in the United States like how the government works. I think that there could be a better job like done like when it comes to reiterating it. Like we only learn civics in like 8th grade and then like through government. Like maybe that should be like a class that like is like incorporated in like social studies, you know what I mean, and like how our government works and how like we can make it better, and how like we as a society like have like our role and our duty to vote and like to do all these different things. I think the problem when it comes to the United States education system is that it's very like, when you compare it to like how school systems like in the rest of the world work, like it's, the United States can vary, like especially private schools, like they can teach you specifically what they want to teach you. So like for example, if I don't want to teach like my students in math class about like integers, like I don't really have to. I can skip over that lesson. I can skip over like certain periods of history that like are uncomfortable. I can skip over like slavery. I can skip over the Holocaust. I can skip over like all these like different like atrocities and like different events in society, or I can sugarcoat it and make it sound like it wasn't as bad as it was. You know what I mean? So it's very like, it's very controlled, especially like based upon like where you grew up. Like there's a reason like you see like certain people that seem to be like a lot more educated and a lot more socially aware and a lot more aware about history versus like other people that just have no clue and are just very, very oblivious. And I think it's because the United States school system is like, doesn't mandate that like certain that certain events in history are taught in a very honest, truthful, and informative way. So I think that's just my opinion. It's like school is not like for to learn. It's like it's more of an indoctrination, especially when it comes to like history specifically.
There's
Uh,
oh sorry.
No, go ahead. I see that you have your little hand up.
So there's no doubt that like other students around the United States like haven't received the same education I have. I know when I was at the ACLU Advocacy Institute last summer, I attended a seminar, and I learned that about like 8% of students in the South could identify the Civil War to be like a war about slavery. So there's no doubt that in schools, like history is completely whitewashed. I mean, I didn't even learn about the Tulsa Massacre until I attended that seminar. So there are definitely like monumental and just really important parts of history that aren't taught at schools. And I definitely think that schools should start like teaching independent thought at a younger age. I remember when I was younger, I think it was during the Obama and Romney election, we were told to like go into a library and just do like a fake voting and like vote. And every single kid in there based their vote like on what like their parents and their grandparents like think. So for example, I remember voting for Rodney when I had no idea about the election or either candidate at all. And that was only because I was just listening to like my family and like my grandparents. And like my parents like voted completely like differently than I did like at the time. So I don't think that was like a healthy exercise for students at all, because all of them based their votes on what like on how like they were socialized and what their family was talking about.
Yeah, like for me, I had a similar experience like in Catholic school. So I went like to a Catholic school that had like mainly like 80 to like 70% like Haitian students. So like I was like remember being like 7 or 8 at the time, and like people were saying like we're gonna vote for Obama because he's black. Like literally, like there was no other reason. So like, I think no, I'm serious. Like the kids were saying that. Like it's just like
A lot of other reasons to vote for Obama, just for the record. But yeah.
So it was just like, yeah, like it I feel like politically, like the way some people act is just kind of like it's not like some people vote because something looks good versus like because it has good substance.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, especially like when you look at the African American community, like it's like they vote religiously Democrat, right? And it's like sometimes that doesn't always like benefit like your community. You know what I mean? Like we have like mass incarceration, single motherhood households, like all these different issues, and our cities and areas are run by Democrats. You know what I'm saying? Or like even like rural white America, like they're run by Republicans, and they have like poverty, they have lack of health care, like they have so many issues in their community, but yet they religiously vote Republican. So it's like you have so many people in America that vote completely against their interests, or just don't vote in their best interest because they see it as, well, you know, I'm gonna vote for this guy because it looks good. I'm gonna vote for this guy because my best friend is, or my mom or my dad is voting for them, or I'm gonna vote for this person because I'm scared of what people are gonna think about me. You know what I mean? So I think it's very like we need to teach people like, don't look at the face, don't look at the superficialness of the candidate, look at the substance, look at their policies, look at how their policies are going to benefit your life. You know what I mean?
That's
Great.
like another, oh sorry,
No, go ahead.
that's just another example of how harmful partisanship can be. Like just because someone has a title, you think, oh, like they're a good person, when they really aren't. And I know that like in a lot of areas where there are like a lot of poverty and where the education levels are low, the representatives of that community like are Democrats. And so sometimes like people just vote people in just because of their title rather than like policies like that they support. And I know that we see this a lot in like this election now, like with Biden and Trump. Biden, I think a lot of people can argue he hasn't, you know, like been that great of a representative of many people. So yeah.
I mean,
I would say he hasn't represented people who aren't borderline senile. But you guys are making a lot of great points. I want to like revert back to a bunch of them, but go ahead, Christy. You were about to say something.
I think it also has to do with the fact that like as an American society, like we often fail to hold like our politicians and our candidates like accountable. Like they're very like good at like I said, the face, like the superficialness. Like if they talk, if they can speak well, if they look good, like Kennedy versus what's his face, Nixon, right? Kennedy was young, he was tan, he was good looking, and Nixon was older, pasty looking. That really helped Kennedy like win the election, like believe it or not. It's like people look at the superficialness of the candidate, like, is he charismatic? Like he can talk to me. Wow, he makes me like feel like he's gonna do something about my community. Like we have to hold them accountable. Like we have to say like, look, I don't care that, you know, you came to our church and spoke to our church. I don't care that like you came and kissed my baby. I need to know what you're gonna do for my community, and you need to give me like a tangible, like actual policy that you're gonna do for my community, how it's gonna help my community, and like how it's gonna work, how we're gonna pay for it. Like that's how American politics and that's how candidacy should work. And we're allowing like a lot of candidates to like just in a way con us into thinking that like just because like they're charismatic or they present themselves well that they're actually good for our community.
I really could not agree more. Mimi just got frozen again.
All right.
Maybe try signing in and out. Yeah. All right, she's gone. But
Yeah.
let's, she's about to come back, no, I'm sure. On this issue of accountability, this is a like truly age-old problem. in the Federalist Papers, which were written, during the founding of the country. There's this concern throughout them about politicians. If we do create a true democracy, there's this concern that politicians are going to con people into voting for somebody who really doesn't deserve to be president or a representative. And the famous line is that we need to worry about the small and vicious arts by which elections are won.
Okay.
Right. So that's one of those, I just love that line, the small and vicious arts by which elections are won. We need to find out how to teach people to truly assess the value of a candidate. And we've never really succeeded, frankly. Where do we start? I mean, obviously education plays a role. Obviously the news media plays a role. What do you think, which of those two do you think are more important to how to really teach people how to be thoughtful about who they're electing and to hold elected officials accountable?
Well, when I think about that, I think it's like a lot of people have issues or problems in their community, but they don't understand like what's the root of the problem and how does the problem work and why does the problem persist. Like, for example, if I have like an issue of like dirty water in my neighborhood, right? Like, we have to figure out like, well, what's causing the water to be dirty? Is it because we're not like, is the filtration system like not being replaced? Why is it not being replaced? Are they not paying for it? Like, are they putting the money towards something else? Like, we have to really have our community be aware of your issues and like actually care about their issues because they affect you too. The problem is that you have a lot of individualistic people that like are like, oh, I'm getting killed in taxes, or like, oh, I'm so sick of like the fact that like I can't put my trash on the street or whatever. Like we have to look at your community, look at the issues that are facing your community as a whole, and what's the root of them, what's causing them. Then you can understand how you fix them. Then you can look at a candidate and hold them accountable and say, okay, what are your policies? How we have like these issues? We think we can fix them in this way. Are you going to be willing to sign those bills? Are you going to be willing to push that like through legislation? Are you going to be willing to help us? I think that's how you effectively change a community for the better.
Yeah. Welcome back, Madeline. Christy, do you think, so I asked you two to do this interview because you two are far and away the most thoughtful and engaged students at Cushman on issues concerning society at large, Miami in particular. You follow politics in a thoughtful way, right? You take it seriously. Very few other students at our school, let's be honest, do that. And we go to a very good school, great education. Is it too much to ask people to sacrifice, X number of hours a week to researching candidates, to researching policies? I mean, people are busy. You see, people have jobs, people have kids, they like to go out to the bar and drink after work instead of like spend 2 hours analyzing policy. Do you think that we need to just kind of get over that? And people just need to do that if we're going to live in a functional democracy? Or is there some other way?
Oh, crap. Mimi's gone.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm thinking in our society, we have like so many issues that are like not as important as like other ones. So like you have issues that are pushed to the forefront like by the media and by like our society, and then you have issues that are like very, very important and very, very concerning that are just kind of like ignored or like left to the side. Like in mainstream media, if you look at like celebrities, and like a lot of people follow celebrities, and like what a lot of celebrities come out and do is they'll talk about like beauty standards and like how I was body shamed and like how I was made to feel bad about my body. But like you rarely see like celebrities come out like in the mainstream media and talk about like poverty and talk about like sexual assault or sexual abuse. Well, in the Me Too movement, yes, but like I'm talking about like within like on a like family level, like on a level in which like it goes on like in the family or in the community, and the community ignores it. Or like also like you don't see like a lot of celebrities talking about like um even like the I'm trying to think of this. Like even like the school system and how like it's like very like unequal, like especially like when it comes to like minorities. Like it's just there's a lot of issues that are pushed to the forefront as like being more important, and it's like when it comes to real issues that affect people and that also cause a lot of these other issues, like they're just like tossed to the side. Like nobody really pays attention to them. You know what I mean?
So your answer to my question of can we expect people to pay enough attention to politics to actually hold elected officials accountable? Your answer to that is hell yeah, because right now we're paying attention to stuff that doesn't matter, right? So it's not that we don't have the time;
Mm-hmm.
it's that we're not allocating our attention properly. And to me, that sounds right. I wonder how to convince people to change their minds. It seems like there needs to be a cultural shift. Like, how do we make being a policy nerd cool? I don't really know.
I think it has a lot to do with like not only how you're raised, but like even like what you see as a child. Like as a kid, like watching like Hannah Montana or like High School Musical or Mean Girls, like the nerdy kids or the kids that were smart or the kids that were like actually cared about like issues in their community, they were always portrayed as being the uncool ones, the losers, like the nerds, the outcasts, like the misfits, like and like the so-called jocks, the mean girls, the people that only cared about superficialness and about being pretty and about money. Like they were pretty much portrayed as like the gods of high school or like the gods of middle school. And it's so sad just how like you always have like that main character that's like the underdog for whatever reason, and it's just it's very like that really warps the mind of a child, and it really warps like our line of thinking, because then it's like you'll never hear a kid say, oh, you're such a jock, right? Like that's not an insult, that's not perceived as an insult, but you'll hear kids say, oh, you're such a nerd, and like that's like can be perceived like as an insult. So you see what I'm saying? It's very much like in like the media, and then like even like little things as like TV shows that little kids are watching, like that can really shape their minds and can really warp their way of thinking in society and like how society works. Like you're teaching a lot of kids like be pretty, be skinny, be a jock. Like it doesn't matter if you're a horrible person, people are gonna worship you, you know, and that's really messed up.
So it's a cultural shift that I work in education, maybe I'm biased, but I think that schools can play a huge role
Yeah.
in helping people prioritize things that matter. Go ahead, Madeline.
So I really do think that like our generation was like not involved in politics and just like social issues at all. But I do think that as more things come like to the forefront, like you know right now like the Black Lives Matter movement, and even in just in other issues, I feel like more students are just becoming like more politically active, and um, as many flaws as like social media does have, I feel like it also has like a lot of benefits. I spend like so much of my day on my social media platforms just reading through posts and like seeing what other people are doing to get involved, and seeing what's going on. There was a girl who was an activist in Florida, I think in Florida, and she actually went missing, and she posted all of this stuff on Twitter. And she was a Black activist who lived in like an abusive home, and she really didn't have a safe place to stay. And she posted all of this on social media, and she was actually found dead a few like days later, when she even said on social media like I was raped, and like just please help me. And we just see so many stories like of that online, and a lot of people are using that to advocate for change. And I'm also like learning a lot on all my social media platforms. I'm learning a lot more about like defunding the police and about other local organizations in Miami that I've just never heard of. And when I was at the protest, I saw so many young people. And even like in the Advocacy Institute, it was like almost like 1,000 just young people there for social justice issues. And at the end of the week, all of us went to protest against the administration's treatment surrounding like immigration issues. Like all of it was students. And I've been to youth democratic town halls. So as much as I thought that like no one was involved before, maybe that was just in our school and possibly other like private schools where I think students tend to be a little more sheltered. I do notice that a lot of students are becoming like more involved, and just on social media too. Like that, I used to like hate social media, but there's just so many information that's like easily accessible for everyone. I mean, the entire world uses social media, and we use it to connect with like representatives. And I think the protests surrounding George Floyd, like a lot of that started on social media. That's where I learned about it. That's where I learned about this girl. I can't pronounce her name correctly, but that's where I learned about all these people. So yeah.
That is, yeah. Thank you for saying so. So, firstly, you're sort of anticipating some of the other conversation topics I wanted to go to. I was going to put your generation on blast, and actually my generation too, because if you look at the numbers, people under 40 in the U.S. vote in just consistently lower rates than people who are older, right? And show up to town hall meetings less frequently and are just less engaged in the conventional way in politics. And there's been this open question in political science for a while about why that is. So maybe we're seeing a turn away from that. I totally agree with you. You see a lot of young people at protests. I'm one of the older people, right? So maybe there is a turn, and maybe social media is fueling that turn, because you also hear about social media as being poisonous, as fueling the partisanship that we were talking about before. But it also is an incredible source of information. You're right. How do we kind of, focusing on social media for a second, how do you think that we, as consumers of social media, or for people who are in charge of operating it, Jack Dorsey, CEO of Twitter, and Zuckerberg in charge of Instagram, what can we do on the consumer or the control side to increase its benefits and decrease its costs, right? Because social media is very much tearing us apart in some ways, but it's also a great educational source. So Madeline, you can go, and then Christy.
Yeah. So first, I don't want to go through this podcast without saying her name, because I know saying people's names is a very important thing to do. Her name is Oluwatoyin Salau. I think that's how you pronounce her name. And so yeah, she was this was in Florida, but anyway, I think Instagram right now, they have like a link for like Black Lives Matter, and I think that the biggest things that these corporations can do is really work on like amplifying Black voices right now. And like in other issues, just amplify people who are directly impacted by those issues, like amplify their voices. But Instagram is doing that. And I mean, I do think the corporations really need to play a role in expressing their solidarity like with the movement themselves. But I mean, I think that if we see like Instagram, like even on the top of your screen, like they do have a link. So when we see like that right there, I don't know, I do think that is helpful in a way. I mean, I don't know. I just think that if the literally like the social media platform where we all are like communicating and interacting with each other, if they talk about it, I think hopefully like people who aren't talking about it that much like feel more obligated to do so. Um,
Okay. Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of power that companies can play in this. Yeah, but I mean, there's also just a lot of potential for abuse from users. Christy, do you want to weigh in on this?
Okay, when I'm thinking, when I think of social media and I think of how it tears people apart, I think it mainly comes from a perspective of like what society deems as acceptable and unacceptable, and like what society will tolerate and what society like won't tolerate. I think that a lot of the issues that we have, like when it comes to like racism, discrimination, like or like poverty, disproportionate amounts of like poverty, and like all of these issues that are faced in America are still like persistently being faced. It's because we have a society that tolerates it or that is complicit through silence. And I think because of this, like you're still gonna have like so many different issues, like even far into the future. Like it's like all of the issues that we have now are still gonna exist because our society is refusing to hold people accountable and refusing to like stand up and say like enough is enough. Like we have to do something about it. Like there's too much complicence. Um, and also I think really when you come down to it, I think with each generation, like there was a different like drug or substance that like made I'm like it's actually a really good point, like that made like people feel good about themselves or like feel amazing. So like for boomers it was LSD, like for millennials like it was like something else, but like now with us, with Gen Z, it's something called clout, like attention.
Huh.
So you have like this generation that like they will literally do and say anything just for attention because it's like they're so like it's so addictive, and it's like and it's so like it's just very very like it fuels like fire and it fuels more things because there's look, we have a society of very insecure, like very psychologically damaged young people when you really think about it, and that's because all of these issues like the adults and the older generations have created an environment where it's like we're not all comfortable and we don't feel good about ourselves. Like why is it okay to make somebody feel bad about themselves because of their body shape or because of the color of their skin or because of their sexual orientation, because like they're this or they're that? Like why has our society created this environment? And like that's why you have so many young Gen Z kids going online saying and doing anything to get attention, to make themselves to make them feel better about themselves. You know what I mean? And so I think it really comes down to creating a society that does not tolerate things that are potentially damaging, especially like to young people.
So when you say that a society that doesn't tolerate things that are damaging, are you when you say don't tolerate it, you're saying socially, like we
Yes.
okay, so this isn't a question of using or passing laws about this. You're talking about we should point at people who are trying to shame others and say shame on you.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
If that, I'm telling you, if every person in America, like if you have someone in your family that like says something that's like racist or homophobic or like that's like hateful or prejudice, if your family checks them, racism would not exist. Like none of this would exist. Like all you have to do is check people like in your family or check people in like your community. Like make them feel like it's not okay for you to think like that. It's not okay for you to hate like somebody. Like it's not okay for you to have like ignorant views about a group of people or about like what someone's doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I mean, I really do agree with you. I think that if, I think the same could be said for this big issue of executive compensation. You know, you've got these huge corporations where the top people in them are raking in tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and then not paying their employees a living wage. I think that if their friends, Jamie Dimon, the CEO chairman of Chase Bank of America, if his friends told him, hey, Jamie, maybe you don't need $1 billion a year as a salary. What are you doing? I think that those sorts of things would make a big difference. And so I agree with you that there needs to be a cultural shift. Where I still wonder is how that happens, where it starts.
Yeah.
Mimi, anything you wanna add to that? I'm moving on to my last few questions.
I think you're good to move on.
Okay.
Well, can I say something really quick?
Of course.
I think an issue people would have with that specifically, like a cultural or a social shift in which certain points are seen as unacceptable, is that like you're gonna have people that are gonna say like, oh well, who are you to tell me like what's morally right, or who are you to tell me like what's socially acceptable? Like, why are you trying to push your opinion on me? Therein lies the problem. Like I think there's a gray area when it comes to a lot of different issues. Like obviously when it comes to gender, like color or like sexual orientation, or religion, like there's no gray area. Like you shouldn't be allowed to discriminate or hate on people like for those 4 reasons. But like anything else, like when it comes to issues like illegal immigration or abortion or like poverty, like there's very, very gray areas. Like there's very, very like it's not black and white when it comes to like all those different issues, you know what I mean? So you're gonna have like people that are gonna think differently and that are gonna have different opinions.
And thank you for bringing it back to that. The reason I want to continue to have conversations like this in this podcast is because this question of American community is so difficult. We don't share the same cultural values as a country in a lot of ways. There isn't cultural symmetry.
Because we're not homogeneous, you know what I mean?
And so where do we begin trying to build that? That sort of common understanding, those shared first principles, right? Where do we begin?
I was gonna say, I think that another reason why there is so much divisiveness in our country is because the issues that Christy said, like, had like a gray area, it really intersects with everything else. Like abortion does intersect with gender issues. Undocumented like immigration does intersect like with a race issue and like issues surrounding like ethnicity. So like
even.
Yeah. So I think just it all intersects. And sometimes when I hear like a certain conversation about abortion rights or about undocumented immigrants, like I get angry because it really like all like intersects with each other. And so
So in other words, our disagreements are fundamental, right? It's not like we need to resolve this little issue, then that little issue, then we'll be okay, right? It's different worldviews. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tough, and it's especially tough. I don't want to get into this right now. Maybe we can do a round 2, but it's especially tough because it sounds intolerant to say that one worldview or one set of values is superior. Mm-hmm. But I think you need to say that also. So it's a difficult question. But I want to go back to this issue of your generation, really anyone under 40, being consistently less engaged in politics than older Americans. And just to clarify for the audience, this isn't this isn't something like when you're young, people tend to not be involved in politics, and then as they age, they get more into it. The older generation, so my parents and your parents, when they were your age and my age, they were more involved in politics than we are today, right? So it's a generational shift. It's not just as you get older. Do you think that that's changing now? And do you think that these protests and especially the way that these protests are fueled by social media, we're going to see a shift in that? What's your guys' prediction?
Well, I think one of the main reasons why like the older generations were way more politically involved was because of the fact that like we had a lot more like major conflicts like in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s than in like the 2000s. Like when you really think about it, like the 60s we had the civil rights movement, like the 70s we had Vietnam, we had like all these different wars, the 80s we had the Cold War, like the 90s we had like the fall of the Soviet Union, like all these different like we had massive shifts like towards the 21st century, like versus like the start of like the 21st century or like the 21st century so far in and of itself has not been as like massively eventful other than like the war in the Middle East or like 9/11 or like any other like you know of these like tragedies. But like I think Gen Z has grown up in a very
No. Christy. All right. Can you text her to just come in to leave and then come out again or come in? Thank you. So we'll let her get back to that when she's back. But what do you think, Madeline? Do you think that that we're seeing a change in that trend?
I hope we see a change in this trend. I know that I voted in the primary election this year, and like so did all of my friends, and like friends as in like 18 and 19-year-olds. So that was definitely a good sign. And like I said, there are so many like young people involved in the movements now, and like in several different movements. The climate strike that we went to as a school, that was like youth led.
Yeah.
Like I said, in so many of these protests, so many of the protesters are young people, and I see that with all of my friends like across the United States. Like they are all like there, or they have been there, or they've been like posting about it, etc. So I'm hopeful that our generation will like be more politically active, just because I've seen it and I've been around people who are. But I don't know if other people have the same experience. I do know that when I went to go to Edison to register people to vote, I think I only got around between like 10 to 20 students registered, which is like relatively low. And I think a big part of that reason is that people think that their voice doesn't matter, like which has happened like historically in the past. So people need to know that their voice matters, and they just need to be better represented. So I am hopeful that more people will be involved, because I've seen them just more involved. But
Yeah, I think the world has, you know, and I think that this is the type of thing where once young people see like, hey, we are all out on the streets, not just in this country, across this country, but across the world. And we're seeing changes in law as a result of it. Once you guys or we really see that momentum, I hope that it continues and strengthens. So I am also hopeful like you are. And the last question that I wanted to ask you, is Christy coming back? Is she?
She should be. Yeah.
I'll ask you first is, what do you think that we as Americans, what do we owe each other? Like what should we, in the broadest possible sense, what do you think that we should be giving each other?
I don't know if I can answer that question. I would say respect, but I don't think some people don't, in my opinion, some people just don't deserve to be like respected. I respect the fact that people have their own opinions, but when their opinions like just hurt other people and discriminate against other people, I just lose like respect for them. So I don't know. Like, that's a really hard question. And yes, divisiveness is really big in this country, but like, there's a reason that everyone is just really divided right now, and people just disagree on like fundamental like issues. So I don't know. I just wish people would just be more educated and just read a little more, read about people's like experiences, and like listen to people like who are affected by issues. Um, but yeah, that's a really hard question.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like what you're saying is what we owe each other is open-mindedness, right? Now, after a certain point, right, maybe somebody earns themselves the right to not deserve your open-mindedness anymore, right? But at the beginning, at least.
I mean, I've definitely have had like uncomfortable conversations with people who disagree with my opinions. And I've been able to listen to them and also like articulate my opinions and my feelings. But whether or not they really listen to me and they like absorb like the information I tell them, like, I don't know. I think people just need to listen to each other. Just like listen to each other and be able to have like conversations. And I just don't know if they are capable of like changing their minds, because just based on what they think already, I don't know if I have like enough hope that they'll change their minds just because of like everything that they've already like said and their actions.
Yeah.
So yeah.
If we were trying to kind of help this country heal itself, and we wanted to start from a place of common ground, where do you think we could start? Like, what do we have in common? This is a huge, diverse country, larger and more diverse probably than any country that's ever existed. What do we have in common in your estimation?
We all live in the same country. Like, it's our country, you know. And obviously people are fighting to make this country better and like what it's supposed to be. Like, I'm sure everyone can agree that we all have the right to like life, liberty, and happiness. But we actually need to work to get to that point, and for everyone in this country to get to that point.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, as much as I disagree like with this divisiveness, like, I understand why it's there, because if people are incapable of like changing their mindset and changing their actions, then it's just gonna stay that way. I can't like be friends with someone, for example, like who's just racist. Like, that won't happen.
Right.
And that's why like divisiveness is a thing.
Yeah.
So
And that's when you gotta take off your intellectual hat and put on your warrior hat. Really, just win. You need to like win against those people. Yeah. Can you call Christy so that maybe she can like over speakerphone answer this question?
yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Christy.
Yeah.
Hey, I have you on speaker, so if you like feel comfortable just saying your answer on the phone, you can do that if you want. You're on speaker.
Sure.
Christy, Christy, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Cool. I'm sorry about that. The last question I wanted to ask you too, Mimi's already given her thoughts. What do you think we as Americans owe each other?
I think as Americans, we owe each other respect. I think that, like it was said before, like, we're not a homogenous country. We're not all the same. We all have different culture. We all come from different places in the world. world, and we all make like this salad bowl. Like it's a salad bowl, but not a soup. You know what I mean? So there's like lettuce, tomatoes, like olives, like this, all these different like things that like make our country, and that's what makes it beautiful. You know what I mean? And I think if people would respect, where someone else is coming from, or like, cultural differences, like religious differences, sexual orientation differences, like I think if people really respected that rather than just like going off of, mine is better than yours, or like mine is or like this is a specific way to be American. Like that's like I think that's what's causing a lot of problems. There's no specific way to be American. You know what I mean? But I think one thing Americans all share is like we're a free country. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Thank you, Christy. I think it's fitting that the last question of what we owe each other, there's a disagreement on. Madeline said that she wants to say that we owe each other respect, but she doesn't think that we do. But Christy, I want to continue this conversation some other time. And thank you so much for your time. And are you going to have your Cushman email for the summer?
Yeah, definitely. So you can shoot me an email.
Awesome.
Anytime.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, guys. This has been great.